Hey guys, it's Greaseball here, and today I kind of want to just talk about Golgari kind of establishing itself as a tier A, tier B deck in the meta, and kind of the implications of Golgari and the effects that it's had on the format. So notably, like Golgari has been sitting in the top tier of untapped plat to mythic win rate for about 2 weeks now. There was also a timeless tournament this past Wednesday, and there were 24 players and four Golgari players, and three of the Golgari players made top eight. And with like all this in mind, it seems like Golgari is here to stay in the meantime. I'm not necessarily declaring it like a best deck or it's in the meta, and it looks like it has some staying power, even kind of being like one of the target decks going into last Wednesday's tournament. So let's look at Golgari mid-range. It was labeled mid-range in the tournament. It's also called Big Black Deck. I've been coining it as Golgari ban list because there are 23 cards that are banned from Modern and Legacy in the deck list. So out of the current meta, I do believe Golgari is leveraging Strip Mine the best. And the big case for this is it has, if you count everything up and you count like the trolls and the shamans and the moxes, it ends up with 29 mana sources. And so on top of this, they're also playing Dark Ritual and Griefs, which play much better when both players are mana screwed. Right, as like when you're mana screwed, you care less about the card advantage or like the card disadvantage from Grief or Dark Ritual, and more about just being able to cast your spells. And so it's just really, really well set up to be in a low resource game. And so for that reason, I think Golgari is the best at leveraging strip mining, kind of getting into these like just games where both players are mana screwed and drawing out of it better than their opponents, just out of virtue of having more mana sources and more stuff to do when there's only like one land in play or zero lands in play. I mean mainly one land in play, right? But they just have a lot to do that's productive. Whereas most decks are just mana screwed, or they're a guide on one turn and then a pride on that turn is like okay, but it's not like you kind of do need follow-ups to get ahead on that. Notably, it also has like Worry Zone Guard, right, which is like the obvious card and taking advantage of Strip Mine. Whereas like a lot of the like Sultai lists and stuff like that are not necessarily playing Worry Zone Guard anymore. Some of them are, some of them aren't. Whereas Golgari is just kind of really, really dead set on, no, I want Strip Mine. We're really good at using Strip Mine, and we're really good at drawing out of Mana Screw. Just against any opponent, even like a 26 land control deck, right? So I'm gonna kind of get into the Strip Mine hierarchy gameplay. I kind of discussed that there was a hierarchy in my last video, but I didn't really like go into too much why. I just kind of used, okay, if it's less colors, that's better for their Strip Mine build. If it has Worry Zone Guard, it's better for Strip Mine, that kind of thing. But I think like from like a theory craft and like gameplay perspective, I kind of just want to cover why I think like Golgari is like kind of able to bully these like lower decks on the Strip Mine hierarchy. And for this example, I'll be using Mardu and Golgari just because those lists are like pretty established, and they're going to be in the meta, so it's like a good relevant example to use. So notably, like in a game state where like both sides end up with like 2 lands, right? Because Mardu is 3 color, if both of them have strip mines, Mardu's actually really going to want to trade their strip mine off for the Golgari strip mine. Whereas Golgari is just kind of like, look, they only have like 2 colors, and it's like a light green splash. They really only need it for Worry Zone Guard. Golgari is actually like, and they have 29 land sources, like, and they just know this, right? And so they just know if both players like lose both their lands, Golgari is going to draw out of it a bit more quickly. So Golgari is actually like really wanting to just like trade off all the lands, trade their strip mine for the Sacred Foundry, and then force the Mardu player to trade off their strip mine for Overgrown Tomb, and then both players have 0 lands in play. Like Golgari is just going to draw out of that a bit better because of their mana sources, and they're gonna be at an advantageous position because of that, right? Whereas and so the issue with this is on the Mardu side is that because of just the way that like strip mine is an activated ability, it immediately sacks. it's really difficult to trade off your strip mine for your opponent's strip mine. It's just a very difficult trade to make. There's just like the opponent would basically have to like Golgari would basically have to like lead on their strip mine, like cycle troll or something, and then Mardu can trade off their strip mine for strip mine. Any other scenario, it's like it's probably not happening, and you're just getting in a worse game state for Mardu where like both players are just down 2 lands instead of just being down 1 land. And because of this, I think this kind of like illustrates like why the hierarchy kind of exists, in that like if you have a deck that's more willing to trade off strip mines for your like your colored sources, you're gonna just kind of also have this edge of like we don't have to you're just always gonna have this edge where you're gonna get to make that trade off like 90+% of the time, whereas the player that wants to trade off strip mines and's like and doesn't want to be in this scenario is like in a lot of trouble. Notably also like Mardu has trouble using the colorless source from strip mine as much as the Golgari decks. But this is just kind of like more of a side note. It's more of just trading off your strip mine for your opponent's strip mine is like really tough. And if you have less land sources than your opponent and y'all are both mana screwed, you're gonna be less likely to draw out of it than them. And that's a very big disadvantage, and that's kind of why you want to avoid playing strip mine if you're not ready to like combat this. There is maybe a world where you just say like no deck besides Golgari should like really run strip mine in the main if Golgari is like 40% of the meta or whatever it is, you know, just say 30%. That might be a little bit crazy. I don't know. You know, because like you can still have games where you mana screw Golgari, right? I just don't think it's as likely. But yeah, I don't know how that'll play out, but I really have not been running too much strip mine in my like strip mine has not felt good outside, nearly as good outside of Golgari as it has, right? So I've kind of been avoiding using strip mine unless I know I'm going to be like on Golgari or there's not a big Golgari meta, or I'm kind of just like punting the Golgari matchup a little bit in that case. Next off, so I think my initial impression of playing Golgari was that Calling Ritual, Postboard, and like the One Ring like really let you crush Mardu on the ladder. And it got to the point where, okay, 2 weeks have passed now. Golgari seems to be like a real deck. It actually kind of is worth testing. And so Nova's created some testing in the server and live streamed it. Notably, Mardu won 4-3 in the matches that were against Golgari. We kind of initially we didn't use any discard, but then we kind of realized that the only cards that Golgari really has that matters are like Calling Ritual and the One Ring. And so if you just bring in a discard and you just say, oh, I'm always going to hit Calling Ritual, I'm always going to hit One Ring, and those are like your big targets for a discard, it actually like works out pretty well, because like a lot of the other like creatures in Golgari are just not that good. Like Bargrave is just not that good. Shieldred is just not that good in comparison to like these like MH3 creatures. So it is like playable, I think, on both sides. I'm not going to say like Mardu's favored or Golgari's favored, but I think it is like a very playable matchup. Yeah, I think on paper, like if I really like under my head I had to pick, I would say Mardu has a slight edge. But it's not like backbreaking or anything like that for either side. But just like knowing that it's like a winnable matchup for Mardu is like versus, you know, in ladder, I think I never lost to Mardu as Golgari because there's like no real sideboard strategy figured out for anyone. I think this is very important moving forward, that like, okay, Mardu actually still just holds their own in this matchup as well. And the like nothing ever happens camp kind of gets a bit happier, but like Mardu is having to make this concession of running 4 Deathrite Shaman in the main. Or, you know, just in their 75, depending on how people are orienting them. And it does cut down on some of the sideboard slots, and it means their matchups against other decks are not necessarily going to be as good. So that is interesting, and it is like kind of like a development. But yeah. But notably, so on ladder, people just don't really want to play energy. That's just what happens. And so more people are kind of playing Golgari as like the fun like beatdown deck. That is like the new thing on the block. And so there's less energy on the ladder. And like, so what that kind of means in general is that there's going to be less static prison. less Galvanic Discharge and less Swords of Plowshares in the format, and a lot more Fatal Push. And that's just a lot more exploitable, right? Because Static Prison just generically hits everything. Galvanic Discharge can hit Planeswalkers. And 5, and Swords of Plowshares can hit anything, and they're all like, they can all hit 5-drops, whereas Fatal Push can't. And so you have kind of like seen these strategies of like maybe some Planeswalkers, like particularly like Oko, or like maybe some of these 5-drops like Solitude or Quantum Riddler just like feel a bit more hexproof in these matchups, which is like kind of interesting. And there's also like there's also been a lot more blue black versus like Sultai too, or just a lot less like blue white in general, or blue white X that's playing swords. And so this removal in this format is just like a lot, it feels like a lot more exploitable right now. And so there's like a lot of the meta has kind of opened it up to that, and I think that's kind of where some of this like mid-range slop and some of the mid-range slop ideas come from. Also with energy being played a lot less, there are much more manageable board states. So whereas like the board state's built by energy from like, if you have Ocelot Pride that's like triggering, or you have an Amped Raptor that's triggering, Ajani, Nikado Pride, like making that extra token, they end up just building these very wide boards with these very efficient threats that can't be answered like well with spot removal, versus something like a Baragorith or like a Shieldred, right? They're very, very like they have no ETBs. You can just clean them up one for one, and board stays like pretty clear, and it's not as like it's not as the board states are just not as resilient, and like you can kind of get away with like if you play Oko into a board with 1 creature on it, it plays way better than playing it into like an energy board with 3 or 4 creatures. And so that's like kind of important to know, like and again, this is also kind of what is pushing us towards like this mid-range slop meta, is that you just don't have these energy board states that are like impossible to like really efficiently handle unless you have like a sweeper or something. 3 CMC Planeswalkers. So again, yeah, Oko is still kind of terrible into energy. They're like, Planeswalkers are still pretty terrible in energy. Notably, like Oko just kind of hits everything in the green-black deck like really well. Baragorith, Shieldred, Troll, One Ring too. Like it just cleanly kind of answers them, and they only have a Fatal Push, right? They could play Trophy, but then that kind of like hurts their Strip Mine strategy a little bit. They could be like maybe like Abrupt Decay or like Long Goodbye, but they haven't really made that adaptation yet. I don't even know if it's like super worthwhile. I'm not entirely sure. But like Oko was in the list that won the tournament. It was really good in the green-black matchups. Yeah, it's interesting seeing like Oko being like somewhat playable, or like just seeing a bit more on ladder, and it's like not kind of an embarrassing thing. Notably, I think Teferi Time Raveler kind of might also have like French use as a pitchable for like Subtlety and Solitude builds. Again, it also like, it 1-for-1's Baragorith, and just bounces Baragorith and set up. It bounces Troll, it bounces Shieldred, and it's like fine, right? So like, a lot more French than Oko. I think Narset is probably like a bit too much on this, but it does stop One Ring, and it plays a bit better in like against these like blue mirrors and stuff like that. But in general, I think just like with the more manageable board states, you're kind of able to like think about these 3-mana Planeswalkers. But I don't know if they're legitimately good or not, or it's just a function of with less energy in the format, you can kind of get away with just being a bit more greedy and just like running a bit more cutesy stuff. I don't know if it's legitimately good. But I think these are kind of things like worth testing with and like finding out and seeing if they actually are legitimately good, or if they're just kind of my fun pet card that I'm playing with, like along with my like standard like 40 blue cards, right? So yeah, we'll see. Notably in this meta, so because energy was just so efficient, it kind of like put a lot of pressure on the rest of the metagame to like, you had to like run very, very, very like strict cards to like compete with energy. With that not being the case, blue is thriving, honestly. They just don't have to account for energy as much. Golgari is a lot more answerable as a level 0 deck. Like your mana drains are just like, they're not double spelling like with like big threats a lot. If they're double spelling, it's like because it's like a Chromox or like a Dark Ritual, right? So it's easier to like, you can just mana drain them, you can just subtlety them, and it's like really good. You can 1-for-1 their threats, it's fine because they don't have ETBs. And so results are like a lot of people are doing really well with a lot of different blue lists. Um, some of them are playing Stifle Strip Mine, some of them aren't. In general, I think the biggest thing that has like the most like pervasive thing I've seen has been that 8-rag strategies are doing really well. Which is just this idea of you're running 4 Cameo and 4 Hydroponics Architect. And they're all just kind of threats that can take over a game if they're left unchecked. And they seem to be like kind of like core to this like blue strategy of like, just you have these really, really efficient threats that can just take over the game. You can do well without like 8-rag and stuff, but this is kind of like, it seems like a very powerful strategy that has kind of been picking up steam, and a lot of people are playing it. Okay, let's just go through like some card stonks and like kind of like what's doing well in the meta right now. So Oko is really, really good in the green black. Subtlety is really, really good in green black. There's also like this idea is because if you're like playing 8-rag, because your 1-drops are so good at like building card advantage that like the 2-for-1 on subtlety doesn't feel nearly as bad if you're like if you're on the play, or just say like you have like Hydroponics Architect down and then your opponent plays like a block, something that could block it like a frog. If you subtlety it, you 2-for-1 yourself to get that, but then you're just gonna recoup the card whenever you draw off the Hydroponics Architect trigger anyways, right? So it's really like not that big of a deal. So just like having more card advantage in blue through Hydroponics Architect has like really, really helped. And notably also like Orcus Bowmasters has gotten like much, much better, I think, just because there is a lot more blue running around, and there is a lot more spot removal running around. Cards that have gotten worse, I think Barograph is just like, it's just kind of not threatening enough a lot of the time. You can just chump it and stuff like that, and it just like it gets bounced, if it gets like it's just like it really doesn't do enough for a 3-drop. I think like Golgari is just kind of playing it because it's like accessible through like Tomb and stuff like that. But it kind of just like still feels worse than a 3-drop should play in Timeless. And unless people have been playing Phantasmal Shieldback with Architect, Hydroponics Architect being like more of a card. So it has seen less play. I don't know if it's like worse or not. I think there's still people that are like kind of trying to figure out like which one is better. Shieldback kind of has a higher floor because you always get the card back. But I personally think like Hydroponics Architect has like the ceiling on Hydroponics Architect and like just being a better top deck, like when there's nothing going on, kind of put it ahead of Shieldback, and I think that's trend is kind of going to continue, but we'll see. I also kind of want to just talk about Hydroponics Architect like a little bit more. So something that like I think like when you're building around Hydroponics Architect, you really want like maybe like 12 fetches or so. And it's actually like really good if you hit like another, like it feels Treasure Cruise really well. And then if you hit like another fetch off of its trigger, it's actually really good because you just get to add one more card to your graveyard for Treasure Cruise for free. Like you also get to like save your fetchables as the game goes along if you do hit a fetchable. And like, so there's a lot of things that kind of like compound and end up playing better than like it looked at release, and it just continues, in my opinion, to play better than it reads. And so it's Hydroponics Architect has just been like a really, really impressive card in this meta. Okay, looking at sideboard stocks. So I think with a lot more blue decks, Veil gets better. There's also like Golgari's main interaction is like discard, right? They usually bring Thoughtseize out of the board and stuff like that. So Veil's just really, really well positioned right now. Notably, I think Ghost Vacuum over Unlicensed Hearse is kind of one of the big changes. There's been a Reanimator list going around, and it's like pretty fast, so like you really want to be able to just like have your hate piece down on 1. And I think it plays a bit better than Surgical because like you want to because like these decks can kind of go like longish, like the game's not just over if you like Surgical their first thing. So having access to your hate piece just like immediately, and having it like being able to like 2 or 3-for-1 them if they're like, or just like completely take away their graveyard from them is really nice. Ghost Vacuum is also just really well positioned against Golgari because if you think about it, it can blank their Deathrite Shaman, it can blank their Wary Zone Guard returning a Strip Mine, it blanks Reanimate. Like you actually have like a lot of reasonable targets just against Golgari too. Then it also just gives you that like top end of activating it when the game goes really long. So just in general, I think Ghost Vacuum has like been overperforming Unlicensed Hearse just as there's a lot more reanimate strategies, and the reanimate strategies are faster. So I think you like Ghost Vacuum over Unlicensed Hearse right now. Notably also like this has been kind of like a side development, but Red actually like has a pretty reasonable sideboard right now. I think for a while, you know, you kind of like Red was just kind of like, oh, you're playing it for Ragavan, you're playing it for Amp Raptor and stuff. But like with the emergence like Mono Red and some like and like some people are playing like Nimble played Blue Red in the top 4 of the tournament this past Wednesday. Like you actually have like a lot of really good sideboard cards that are red. Fire Magic's probably one of your best cards against energy. Deafening Silence has gotten worse in the Show and Tell just because of the way Show and Tell's built now. So Rolling Vortex actually like ends up playing a bit better. Meltdown's the best card in an affinity, hands down. Not that that like matters too much. If you're creatureless, you can go Ragavan post board against certain decks, and it's like really reasonable, and like you know it can, or like in like a combo mirror or something like that. That's really good. Also, when the Spider-Man set releases, we're getting Kraz of the Swarmers one, which is really good. Like anti One Ring tech. So like mono red is just like I think before it was just kind of like a color you played if you like wanted to happen to be in red. But now there's actually like a pretty like reasonable sideboard built out for it that I think is like interesting from a deck building perspective because you don't necessarily have to touch as many other colors. It's kind of like almost like enough on its own. I wouldn't go like that far, but it's very close to being that. Kind of for my last thing. So I kind of want to look at the existing Stompy shells of Mono Red Stompy and Golgari, you know, big black deck or like Golgari ban list, right? So they're actually, if you look, I've laid them out to be pretty similar to each other, so that you can like see their similarities, right? So, like they both play, you know, 4 Ancient Tomb, 4 Strip Mine. They play the 4 Chromox. They're playing Removal. They're playing a 1-drop that like pushes mana with Ragavan and Deathrite Shaman. They play the Goyfs. They play One Ring, and then they play Elementals. And so, and these are both kind of like I mean Golgari is definitely a bit better than Mono Red, but they're both like viable ladder decks in my opinion. And so it kind of like it's kind of helpful to like see this like this pattern in deck building of like what is like working in the format. And you know, I think like, you know, having very impactful elementals, like the next logical color to look at a shell like this would be mono white with Solitude. And just kind of like looking at like how close like a mono white Stompy shell is to being playable and timeless. It seems to be about like 2 to 3 cards. Ideally, they kind of need, this is a big ask, like a more snowbally 1-drop. But also a more reasonable ask would be the, like some of the initiative creatures. To give like, to kind of round out their 3s and 4s that are like very impactful, because right now they don't have that. But I think it's kind of like neat how similar these like 2 very different, or like these like 2 different shells of decks are. And I think it's kind of like important to like when deck building and like keeping tabs on spoilers, it's kind of helpful to like understand like how far away a shell like mono white Stompy is by like looking at other decks that are viable and timeless. Yeah, this is kind of like everything that I wanted to cover in timeless right now. I think it's like in a really interesting space with like all this mid-range running around and like some cards just like starting to feel a bit more playable. I think a lot of that is due to the lack of energy still, but it is kind of interesting just like especially looking at like Hydroponics Architect, like if you think about it, like that is a card that was like specifically designed for timeless, like because it has fetches. But you're also, it's not like Vintage where you have so much power that like you're drawing less into fetches and like having fetchables and stuff like that. Like it is just like a really well designed card for timeless, and I really do feel like timeless is in a great spot right now, and timeless is kind of like being looked out well. And so yeah, it's just been really exciting. I've been playing a lot of games, and it's been a really fun format, and I hope everyone else is also having a really fun time.